In this talk, we present a comparative study of dark patterns across 3 web and mobile modalities, with the goal of learning how these patterns might differ across versions of the same service and what any differences might reveal. This is joint work with Amogh Pradeep, David Choffnes, Woodrow Hartzog, and Christo and is supported by Google Aspire and NSF Frontiers grants. So, what are dark patterns? Generally speaking, they're often defined as designs used to trick or manipulate people towards unintended actions or situations. Chances are, if you've been on the internet in recent years, you've encountered one before. And in recent months, they've garnered considerable attention for the ways they interfere with your digital experience. A lot of this attention focuses on privacy issues, especially when it comes to extracting user consent for things like cookies, registration, or data collection. This example primarily uses the pre-selection dark pattern, which picks an option for you before you get a real chance to decide on anything. But this example also uses a confusing consent regime that groups necessary items like the terms and conditions and the privacy policy with unrelated, optional things like email and rewards program subscriptions, thus forcing you to agree to tertiary options that you may not have wanted when you're just trying to create an account. Designs like these make it difficult to understand what you're signing up for, don't give you real choices, and trap you in the decisions you make. But beyond consent interactions, dark patterns can be employed in diverse ways to extract attention, data, and money from you by interfering with your autonomy. In academic circles, researchers have built taxonomies of dark patterns that explain how they work and what makes them dark, and they've also investigated dark patterns in mobile apps and e-commerce websites. These prior investigations looked at apps and websites in isolation, which leaves open questions on how dark patterns are used by services that offer both. Today's online services can be accessed virtually anywhere, anytime, through a variety of platform and device types like smartphones, tablets, computers, and more. These platforms constrain user interactions through different affordances, capabilities, and design norms. So if the user experience differs between interface types, so might the darkness experience. And if that's unequal across different versions, then the versions with relatively fewer dark patterns might incorrectly imply that an online service is benign overall. Following this concern, our work then asked these 2 questions on dark pattern consistency. We wanted to see whether dark patterns differ in quantity, that is, the number of observed patterns per service or per dark pattern, as well as qualitatively, meaning the types of dark patterns we might observe in each modality. In short, we find that yes, dark patterns differ across versions of a service, both in count and in dark pattern type. To arrive at this answer, we built upon prior manual content analysis methods for observing live online services. We examined 105 popular web services, including the logo seen here, which spanned 29 categories from the Google Play Store. We then recorded 5 to 6 minutes of interaction for each service in the mobile app, mobile browser, and desktop browser modalities. After that, we reviewed the recordings and manually classified instances of dark patterns using a codebook of 50 dark pattern cases that we mapped to existing taxonomies. These recordings took over 30 human hours to complete, and reviewing them took approximately 3 times as long to label and validate between 2 people. So earlier we said that dark patterns do differ within services. Let's now explore how they differ. Across all services, we learned that each contained at least 1 dark pattern, with the average and median services containing approximately 7 to 8. Of these, the averages and medians were closer to 7 dark patterns in either browser and closer to 8 for the apps. We also found that the disparity in the number of unique dark patterns per service could vary by up to 10 dark patterns between modalities. Then, for a broader look at these disparities, we charted the cumulative distributive function of the Jacquard coefficient between pairs of modalities. This coefficient represents the number of overlapping patterns divided by the union of all patterns found between the 2 modalities. A higher coefficient denotes higher similarity, and from this we learned that the intersection, or overlap, of shared dark patterns is quite similar between browsers, but not between either browser and the app. This indicates that the app versions are often inconsistent with the other modalities. From these disparities, we conclude that modalities matter. A version-agnostic view of dark patterns doesn't account for different experiences of the same service, which can contain different dark pattern counts and dark pattern types. And with that in mind, we now turn to a different question. How do dark patterns differ across the 3 modalities? Overall, we find a skew towards more dark patterns in apps, with more than half of the dark patterns in our codebook appearing more frequently in apps. Then, to better understand what kinds of dark patterns these might be, we grouped our codebook of dark patterns to different context categories. And we organize these categories based on different interaction areas, like vendor or user objectives, provided features, or dark pattern purposes. We then calculated the number of services containing at least one dark pattern from each category and found that while a few of these categories are fairly consistent between modalities, others substantially favor apps, which is worrying for engagement and location contexts, as smartphones provide opportunities to track and engage with users anytime, anywhere. It's also concerning that contexts for first using a service or for trying to leave it also skew towards apps, as these types of dark patterns can trap users and their data within a service. Okay, so now we've learned that modalities matter and that apps often have more dark patterns. What does that mean? Let's take a look at an example. In this instance, we wanted to know if services force users to manage similar settings individually, which takes more time and effort, or if they make this easy for users by providing bulk options. In this example from Verbo, we looked for notification settings in each modality and found the left screenshot in the app and the right in the mobile browser. Unlike the app, the mobile browser offered a select all bulk option, which tells us that the service is capable of implementing such a design. Designs like these benefit the user by making tasks more efficient and less time-consuming, so it's odd when beneficial features are not universally provided. But upon closer inspection, we found more cause for concern. The mobile browser offered this bulk toggle in part because it also offered two types of notification settings. The app, in comparison, only provided one, push notifications. And yet, we created accounts using an email address in both modalities, leaving us to wonder why the app didn't offer email settings as well. Dark patterns make for a suboptimal digital experience overall, like when they make tasks like preference management or consent overly burdensome for everyone. But the Verbo example illustrates that people can experience different outcomes depending on what a modality allows them to access or how a modality presents those options in the first place. For example, when options for things like settings or account deletion are missing from an app-only user will have no way of knowing what controls they should have access to and no way of exercising that control. Dark pattern inconsistencies across modalities can unfairly exploit users who have limited access to other versions of a service. This becomes more concerning when accounting for socioeconomic disparities in device ownership and home internet access. Research indicates that lower-income users often rely more heavily on smartphones and own less devices than higher-income users, which raises questions of fairness for a service offering multiple versions. So what then? To bring back an earlier point, we know that interfaces differ. But we're also not so convinced that interface quirks should result in designs like the Verbo example, where helpful interface elements and features are completely missing in a modality, especially for features that help people exercise control over their accounts. User experiences of agency and autonomy should remain consistent no matter where or how a user accesses a service, in order to keep online experiences fair for all. To achieve this, designers who are aware of dark pattern differences across versions can advocate for and build standardized agency and autonomy features, while future research can investigate how interfaces or platforms influence dark designs, or how dark patterns impact different populations. Modality awareness also helps regulators discover compliance issues that aren't visible at a service level. Now, much more work remains to be done to fight dark patterns and equalize user experiences, but there are already some promising efforts. While we were preparing this presentation, Apple announced that iOS developers must provide a way for users to initiate account deletion within the app. And while it's not clear whether this will result in users being able to also complete deletion within the app, it's a start. And similarly, proposed additions to the CCPA require that the number of steps to opt out of something be equal to or less than those to opt in, which we hope will result in services ensuring that opting out isn't more difficult or even impossible in a given modality over another. In sum, we performed a comparative analysis of 3 versions of 105 popular online services to find that dark pattern experiences are not equal between the 3 modalities and often skew towards apps. We additionally stressed the importance of equalizing user experiences of autonomy and agency across different versions of a service and explore implications for designers, researchers, and policymakers. For greater detail and depth, we encourage you to check out a paper or reach out to our team. Thanks so much for watching.